Welcome to the AmericanaMusic.com podcast with your host, Sarah Popejoy.
Today on AmericanaMusic.com podcast, we're excited to have Kai Crowe-Getty with his new album, Wreckage, releasing this Friday, June 27th. It echoes of Mellencamp, Petty, and Springsteen storytelling with driving guitar grooves. Kai is no stranger to touring as a previous frontman for the rock band Lord Nelson. We're happy to have him on the show with us today. Welcome, Kai.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Kai, where did you grow up?
I grew up here, and I still live in Central Virginia in Nelson County, which is a little rural area tucked up against the Blue Ridge foothills, right kind of in the smack dab middle of the state.
Is that anywhere near Shenandoah Crossing?
We're really close to Shenandoah National Park. So we're Shenandoah Crossings, a little, probably about an hour and change.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Been out to your neck of the woods.
Our main thing is agritourism here, so we get a lot of folks through the fall and the leaves and recreation and all that stuff. So it's a really beautiful area.
Yeah, it is pretty. When you were growing up, what inspired you? What got you into music?
I was very fortunate to grow up in a household where there was often music on. My dad would play music, or there'd be classical music on the radio. It was just a part of life. It was the fabric of childhood. And my father's an artist. He's a wood-fired potter. So growing up in a very unique context, which looking backwards now, I realize how different that was to a lot of folks, that pursuing music or pursuing art always felt very normal and natural. It was modeled as a path. My dad, he still comes to my shows. My parents are still super supportive. And when you're young doing that, it's like, oh gosh. And now it's just the sweetest thing ever. And I love that he calls me with notes about the album and stuff here and there. And it's a really special relationship. And my brother plays in bands. We have a whole family tradition of it. It's never not felt like something I was going to do. It just was always there. It was never really a conscious choice. It just has always been there.
That's really cool. It makes a big difference too, that support from your family as well.
And I'm fortunate to have grown up just with my personality, growing up in a small town where there's a lot of space to fail and a lot of forgiveness from the community, just seeing us flailing away as young bands and songwriters. And I think if I had grown up in a major market, I would not have had the ability to keep failing forward, to have that desire still there. So I was very fortunate with my disposition, the upbringing I had in the place I was.
Who were some of your influences growing up?
Well, that was a very complimentary and kind intro you just did. And I'd say that you hit a few of those right on the nail on the head there. I grew up, my father is a songwriter and has a band. So I grew up, my brother and I, with him playing guitar in the house. And so we grew up listening to Dylan, the band, Joni Mitchell, all these artists from his era in the 60s. And so that was sort of my formative background in songcraft and storytelling. And then got into Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, and, kind of grew from there.
Awesome. Previously, still in the rock band Lord Nelson. This new music that you're releasing, is this your first Americana album?
Yeah, I think it's the genre term I've struggled with for a while. And I think that as a band, the last Lord Nelson record was released in sort of the Americana format. It touches that world. But for me, these songs on this record is my first solo release after doing the band thing for a long time. And I've been writing and recording these songs sort of in the background between tours with Lord Nelson. And this was just sort of the right moment to step back from that and to really lean into this and to put these songs out in the world and see where they fly.
So do you write most of the songs on the album?
Yeah, on the Wreckage here, I wrote all these songs. I think with playing with a big rock band, I could give myself the permission to be less personal and to approach songwriting with a sort of a bigger tent approach, whereas on this record, I really tried to lean into a lot of personal experience and people close to me going through different things. And so there's a lot more personal storytelling on this record than on anything I've done before.
Your first single, Heavy as Heaven, the lyrics from the end of the chorus, "You've got a heart that feels a great depression, but I know it's hard when you're heavy as heaven." What was the inspiration or story behind that song?
We put this out as the first single. It was just one that I felt the most emotional attachment to, I think, of this batch of songs after stepping away from them and coming back and realizing, I still feel pretty strongly about this cut. That song, I had come up with a little hook for it on the piano and sort of was mulling it over while on the road and coming home, sort of figuring out that I was really exhausted and burnt out from being on the road, realizing sort of the toll that can take on yourself and those around you in your life. Mm-hmm. And so this song touches a lot of those feelings of trying to negotiate kind of two different worlds at times with people who are going through their own sort of emotional and difficult periods. So that song, that phrase came to me, heavy as heaven. And I like things that aren't crystal clear, that have a bit of ambiguity to them and leave something to the listener. So that really echoed with me and stuck with me. And that song all came together very quickly, which is always a good sign, because I labor over a lot of songs a lot of times. So when it comes here, you say, okay, let's run with this.
Yeah, some of them come straight out and then some of them take their sweet time. Your song, A Southeast State, first song on the album, there's a line that says, she talks about her parents like one day they'll be back. And man, that line just hit me. I love that line. Can you talk a little bit about that song?
Yeah, so Southeast State is a song. It was one of the first that kind of came together for this collection. I found a picture of my grandparents, whom I never met, in a scrapbook, and it resonated with me. There was a picture, like my grandmother was looking up in a lawn chair, and that sort of was the jumping off point lyrically for this track. And so there was an aunt who had passed away recently who was really, really close to me. So there's a lot of family history and loss when we talk about people wistfully in our lives at times, and hoping that they'll be back in some capacity, whether they visit you in a dream or you are able to communicate with them however you can. I think that's sort of the loss and finding that balance in your current life with those around you.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. That line, I don't know why it just hit me.
Sort of take from some of my favorite songwriters is how do you just create an area of thought or a place without a lot of answers, just let people bring their own ideas to the table, or their own history, or their own, to write themselves in wherever. So I think it's when lines like that come to me, and I just was working through it and thought, this works. At the moment, I didn't know exactly what I meant. And then by finishing the song, coming back to it, it's like, oh, I see how this fits, but I enjoy sort of creating these not too clearly drawn lines and seeing where that goes.
So recently I interviewed Gretchen Peters. What you're saying just kind of makes me think one of the things she said that I just never thought about in songwriting before. She said that instead of writing songs to express what she's learned, she thinks it's better to write songs as a question to find out how she feels about things, and that those songs relate to people better. What you were saying right there just kind of makes me think of that, and I really like that. That's cool.
She put that really well. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Dancing on a Razor's Edge has a catchy melody and a Hammond B3. It's a very visual song with lines like, water hits the dam and washes us away, which, I love that line. Were you envisioning a certain character for this song when you were creating this song?
Yeah, this one, I haven't really talked about this too much with folks, even anyone in my life, but this one is probably the most personal song on the record. My mother passed away when I was very young, and I have a hard time writing directly about things, and so I just sort of take a thought or feeling or a concept and see where that takes me. And so this is not overly literal, but there are some very exact imagery and emotions in here. And so yeah, there's a lot of that piece in there. So I think really this was a song where I was envisioning myself, which I don't often do. Often I try to come from a voice or a character that speaks to me, that will have a fair amount of myself in it. But this one, it felt like talking to myself as a kid a little bit.
Oh, wow. Thanks for sharing that. On your song, The Wreckage,
sure,
it starts out kind of light and airy, and I feel like the music kind of is a little bit too. Camel lights and a cherry Coke, even though it's laid back, the music and stuff, and then starts coming in with accidents and ER trips, a sadness you never spoke, prescription pills and doctor's notes. Then you know that the song's kind of headed to addiction at that point, obviously. The chorus says, you pulled out from the wreckage that life put you through. My friend, this world ain't done with you. And I love that line, because at first I was trying to figure out where you're going with the song. Can you talk a little bit about that song and the story behind that song? It's real powerful.
When I wrote it, there was several people very close to my life who were going through different, very tough things, from some mental health issues to addiction issues to trauma of different backgrounds. And so it just felt like this moment where these things were all sort of crystallizing, and several folks really close to me. I think just writing a song that dives into, there are a lot of really negative things about it. And I think for me, trying to find a way to be supportive of folks, to see them, to give them space. And you can't just tell someone who's going through that, like, oh, it's fine. You're fine. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So finding a way to listen to what's actually happening to the people you care about. No one's going to change unless they want to, or they can, or they are in the right place to do that. I love to deposit sort of the darker sides that we all deal with, but then find something to look forward to or to reach towards. And I think this song, which sort of encapsulates the whole album, which is why I chose it as the title track, sort of deals with that in a direct way. When I got the line, when I figured out the chorus, when that came together, it was easy to put the other pieces around it. And these are all like very specific things that I encounter with folks in my life, like I was saying. But I think the world is a beautiful place. And I think it's really hard to always feel that. We have so many things telling us that what we're doing is wrong, we're not good enough, or we're dealing with immense trauma. And so just saying this world isn't done with you feels kind of glib, but at the same time, it's not, unless you want it to be.
There's an Amy Mann album, and she just calls it mental illness. Sometimes there can be such a stigma around certain things people are going through, and they're afraid to talk about it. And then sometimes just calling it out or just actually talking about it, I think is very helpful to people, kind of destigmatize it.
Which I feel like we are getting somewhat better at as a society, as a culture, and that awareness, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier for the person in the moment going through it.
Yeah. I think sometimes just getting down in the weeds with people is what they need the most.
Yeah, to feel heard, be acknowledged.
Your song, No One Breaks a Heart Like You, which is a great line. It has rolling piano keys, and it starts out with the piano. For a second there, it almost takes me back like 100 years ago with the bright-sounding pianos in the Western saloon. Can you talk a little bit about writing that song, how that song came together?
Yeah, I'm a really bad piano player, but I have a broken I am, which has been a blessing. And like 3 of the songs on here I predominantly wrote on piano, and sort of having that limitation really helped. So this one is like, it's just, descending on the white keys. Basically, it's a very, very simple song. I wrote it on my out-of-tune upright here in my house, and had it overdubbed by, there's 2 piano players who are very talented on this track. So that's not me. I came up with the line while I was in the back of a van on tour, and I just wrote it down and came back to it when I got home and sat down at the piano and just started working through it. Then this whole story just kind of fell out. And so I think it definitely draws heavy from some of my heroes like Tom Waits or Dylan, sort of Time Out of Mind era stuff. And yeah, it was fun. The arrangements, and I think like you spoke to like the Wreckage in this one, there is like a brightness to a lot of them, even though the content is not necessarily fitting the the tone of the music, which is, I kind of like that.
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
Well, what was cool about it too is it's a super simple line, but I don't know of another song like that with that line. So I was like, that's a cool line, especially when you can find those hidden gems, you know what I mean?
Gosh, I know. I was like looking around, I was like, did I just stumble upon, because I think all songwriters at some point go through that, where you come up with this really good idea and you find there's like 20 other songs out there with that title.
Don't you hate that?
Yeah, of course. But it means we're all digging around the same dirt. But yeah, so when I found this one, I was like, this really spoke to me, and I couldn't find anything else out there like it. So I was like, okay, let's run with it.
I had a song like that, and then a year later, Leanne Rimes came out with the same title. I was so mad.
Will she listen to my voice memos? Yeah. I hate that. You write something and it doesn't get released for years, and by the time it comes out, folks think, oh, you're parodying out this other thing. You're like, no, I wrote this 5 years ago,
Yeah, I was first.
Okay, sure. Tell yourself. Exactly. Yeah.
What do you hope listeners get from this new album?
I think the album touches a lot on personal relationships. It talks about pain, hurt, trauma, fractured relationship. I hope that it allows people to connect with those parts of their own lives, but to sit with that feeling, which I think we all often try to gloss through and our feet moving forward. But I think ultimately I want people to come away with a sense of purpose or hope. Here are the things, and here's how I need to approach them or deal with them. But ultimately just to have time in that space to feel the questions, to feel the openness, to hopefully find something they relate to and something that brings some optimism at the end of a hard stretch.
What would somebody expect to see at a Kai Crowe-Getty show?
That's a good question. I enjoy this record because I think when I'm playing with my rock band, it's less about crowd interaction and just like let's play these big songs and let's have a party, and I really enjoy this record, playing it for listening audiences, but also playing, some rowdier shows. And so I love engaging with people from the stage. I love that kind of interaction and community, because I think I don't want people to feel, nothing bristles more to me than someone on stage telling the audience to shut up and listen to this song. That just feels so self-aggrandizing to me. But I think audiences, you can play a quiet song and they'll tune into that. And I think you have to give that invitation. You have to create that space. And that's what I hope to do with live shows, is create a space for people to laugh and hang out with their neighbors and socialize, but also to realize, oh, this is a heavier moment. Let's all key into this for a moment. And so I hope it's a little of everything. And just a chance to get loud, to get quiet, to laugh, to feel things. And that's what I hope a show would be for folks.
Where was this album produced?
This album, it was done primarily in 3 different studios, 2 of them in Virginia, 1 in Nashville, just by virtue of I'd write a batch of 4 songs and then get a crew together and do those. The majority of it happened right before the pandemic. During the next couple of years, I was recording a couple more batches. But yeah, most of it was in White Star Studios in Louisa, Virginia. That was sort of like the bulk of most of these tracks.
I feel like now we're getting a lot of that pandemic gold. I thought that it was going to come out a little earlier, but I feel like right now it's just when so many people are coming out with stuff that they were working on back then.
My band had a record in the can, and then I had like 60% of this one, and so it was sort of neck and neck to see which would come out first. The band one came out first, and I thought, all these like sad, introspective songs are going to not be as relevant once we're past the pandemic. And it's no, the human condition will always revert back to these at times. It's been nice to sort of put this aside for a minute and then come back to it now and realize, oh yeah, this does work. I do like these songs, and I'm excited to get them out in the world.
Where did you record in Nashville?
Yeah, I recorded at this little place, a little studio called Fatback Sound. There was a guy named Sam Wilson who was in a band, Sons of Bill, who was sort of like the big country rock band out of Charlottesville, Virginia, where I'm based out of. And so I made a connection with him again around the pandemic, and he was doing some producing and recording. It was a really fun experience, something totally different where I just did. I mostly recorded this album, and I've only recorded albums live with the band in the room. And this was a cool experience to go out and just do an acoustic demo and a vocal. And then he and his partner would lay everything else down on top of it, which I wanted to try that. And that was really cool to have some songs on the record that were a little more produced and a little more intricate with his attention to detail.
Which songs were those?
Brass Angels and Dancing on a Razor's Edge and Forks of Buffalo. Those 3 all came from that session.
Dancing on a Razor's Edge, that song's rocking.
It was like not at all what I expected, which was the beauty of it. I love giving that freedom to really talented folks to play with it. And there was like some Glenn Campbell era, Laurel Canyon stuff, and like the big 12-string guitars and stuff. I was like, oh, this is cool. This has a totally different ballad feel than I was expecting, and I really enjoy it.
What do you think makes a great song?
What makes a great song? That's a great question. I think that something that draws the listener out of themselves a little bit subconsciously, that opens up a world for them to experience and feel and just escape the everyday grind of life for a moment, and to touch on deeper feeling, to bring out emotions that they don't engage with regularly. And I think that's what I love when I hear a great song, that it takes me out of my head for a minute, that it allows me to feel things I wouldn't normally engage with, and leaves me thinking or with more questions than I went into it with.
What are some of your all-time favorite top-notch songs? If I could write a song, prime example of what a great song is.
Yeah, there's a songwriter named Malcolm Holcomb who wrote a song called Who Carried You. It's one that it blew me away the minute I heard it, and I still like go back to it, and it's just about the perfect song to me. It wraps nostalgia and so well in a modern context, and it's just a gorgeous song and heartbreaking. And I think John Prine, like The Speed, the Sound of Loneliness, is another great example. I think the perfect touchstone for anyone trying to write, because the wry humor with just deep, piercing feeling so subtly woven throughout. And I think that song is the perfect example of sort of like how devastating a nice, sunny major key song can actually be.
That's very cool. Very cool. Are you going to be touring with this album?
We have a few things coming up in June around the release. I have a big release show here in hometown Charlottesville, Virginia. And then I think in fall, things will sort of like August forward, it'll start to pick up a little bit more. And just sort of seeing where it goes, what opportunities pop up, and sort of writing that, which has been, there's a lot of flexibility and freedom with this, which I've enjoyed, unlike sort of the bigger machinery of a rock band. And so this allows me to do a lot of solo stuff, to play with the full band, to do duo shows. So sort of wherever the opportunities come up, trying to enjoy that and see what happens.
Is this something you want to keep doing with making Americana albums? How does it feel? I know you said something about how when performing it live, that with the rock, it's just more, it's not quite as personal and stuff. Actually, I'm going to back up. First, was that kind of a hard adjustment to make with the Americana, or did it just feel natural?
I feel like I've always approached songwriting through the same context, sort of however they come out, and there's just the dial gets turned a little bit one way or the other. But I think that however folks use the broader term of Americana, I feel like for me, it's writing about the people and the places and these very personal but universal experiences we all have. But to me, the specificity of the world is important. And I think that on this record, I really engage with that a lot more. It feels like a collection of short stories to me. It feels literary, and when I sit back and look at how the songs all came together, I love doing the rock and roll thing. I think that there's room for both in the world and in my space. And so I've really enjoyed this experience. I'm curious to see, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I have a bunch of songs. I have a handful recorded in a bucket, but I think seeing how this rolls out, how folks engage with it, how I engage with it, and sort of what is inspirational or motivating going forward. But yeah, I think this level of songwriting, I've really challenged myself, and I think I will continue to do so in that vein, however that comes forth.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, it's a really great album. I really enjoyed listening to it, and it's right up my alley because it's the kind of stuff that I love listening to, with the driving licks and the stories. Is really, really cool. Well, Kai, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day, just answering questions and telling us all about your new album. I want everybody to download the Wreckage and check it out. It'll be released this Friday, June 27th. Thank you so much for joining us. Kai, I appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate the time and the level of detail and interest here, and I really enjoy just getting to the nitty-gritty of songwriting, and I feel like it's a rare thing often. So thank you so much for making space for this, and I really appreciate it.
Here's a short clip from next week's interview with Jerry Douglas.
Well, my musical heroes, it was easy. It was Flatt and Scruggs, the Stanley Brothers, Jim and Jesse, and, those were the records that were in our house. Plus, I got to see Flatt and Scruggs twice when I was a kid. That was like seeing the Beatles to me, Oh. My wife grew up in Memphis. She actually saw the Beatles. I've got so many good memories of being up there and hearing good music. Those were the people that I got to see live, but my real hero was Josh Graves, who played the dobro with Flatt and Scruggs, and that just did everything for me. It was the coolest looking instrument I'd ever seen. Just the way he played it, just the way he could play and keep up with Earl Scruggs. He presented this kind of blues to the music that hadn't been there before, not to that extent. And that gave Flatt and Scruggs a broader appeal, gave them, more people would come to see him. It was just something that no one else had. Josh, he's legendary. He's the first guy to really introduce dobro into bluegrass music and really make it work. He's been my role model ever since.
So how did you get started playing dobro?
I got a Silvertone guitar for Christmas one year, and I played that as much as I could. My dad had a nice Hummingbird Gibson guitar, and he had a D28 Martin. I wasn't allowed to play those guitars until I really knew what I was doing. But I had this Silvertone guitar that was like a cheese grater, the strings were kind of high, and it hurt to play. And then my dad took me to see Flatt and Scruggs, and I already knew that I loved hearing the dobro on the records. But when I saw him play live, when we got home, I remember asking him, "You raise the strings up on my guitar a little bit. I'll learn how to play like that guy." So I started out with, I think he cut the end off of a toothbrush.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Put that up there and made notches in it and put the strings in it and raised the strings, up high off the neck. And I used a piece of copper tubing as a bar, as a slide, was my first slide. Not very good quality stuff. It did the job. It made me believe that I was really, really playing. I was really headed in the right direction. I was going to be a huge star with this Silvertone guitar. Last guitar I'll ever need.
Thank you so much for listening to AmericanaMusic.com podcast. Be sure to go to AmericanaMusic.com and find playlists of the Americana artists we've interviewed here. Also, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. This is usually where we end our show, but I wanted to share with you something special, something I've been working on lately. It's called American Music Town. It's not set to even come out until September of this year, but by next week you'll be able to follow the show so that you won't miss an episode. I'm going to give you a little description of that project I'm so excited to share with you. In towns and cities throughout the United States are the historical landscapes of Americana music. They tell the stories that have changed our culture, our politics, and even how we listen to music. The American Music Town podcast takes you on a musical journey into America's both famous and lesser-known towns with stories you don't want to miss. Hosted by AmericanaMusic.com's Sarah Popejoy, that's me, travel with us as we seek out the history behind the music that has changed us. If this podcast interests you, follow us. A few of the towns that we're going to be sharing. This very first episode is going to be on Muscle Shoals, Alabama. So you don't want to miss this new podcast. It's going to have a ton of really, really cool stuff as we dive deep into music history and music towns throughout the United States. And thank you as always for listening.